Sounds good.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming back to those who have, and good day to those who are hopefully viewing the recording at a later time. A reminder to the fellows that if you are unable to join, please make sure that you update your calendar invitation so that I am aware and able to adequately track participation in each event. It's important for me to be aware of who's going to be in the room. It also helps me to better prepare the presenters that we have invited and who have taken time out of their busy schedules to be with us. So if you're able to do that, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. So over the past few weeks, granted, last week we had more of a seminar conversation where we were debriefing past speakers, but since the start of the semester, we have been focusing on different types of technology as it relates to the work of policing. We've heard from Andrew Ferguson, who talked about predictive policing, the Fourth Amendment, and its application to policing technology. We heard from folks from Polis Solutions who were examining body worn cameras, how to analyze the data, and existing legal precedent as it relates to BWC footage. And then last week, we were able to spend a bit of time digesting this information as a group, starting to determine if and how technology today, as it relates to policing, can be applied to our understanding of what it means to be a community oriented policing service. I was grateful for that time with a smaller group last week to speak off the record, which is why that video has not been uploaded to the YouTube channel. For awareness, all future seminars will be held in a similar fashion, keeping it more of a closed and protected space. Based off of what we have heard to date, I wanted to pivot slightly and think about how the data, how technology that is being used to collect data can be applied. In my day job, as well as in my capacity as director of this work, we are a lot of different organizations are spending additional time and focus on applying data to see where crime is happening, how we can determine what that data tells us for both response as well as proactive approaches. And in a lot of my scholarship, one organization continued to arise. And so, with that in mind, I reached out to folks at that organization, which is AH Datalytics, to get a better read on the type of work that they are doing. Um, AH Datalytics is they partner with dozens of organizations to optimize the structuring of their data collection and presentation, creating compelling data visualizations and thoughtful analysis to inform decision making and promote transparency. And with their criminal justice expertise, they've applied that framing to a criminal justice angle to apply it at the intersection of data, policy, and criminal justice. They are helping communities, law enforcement agencies, and prosecutors' offices across the country use this information. So, making sure that not only is it captured, but it is actually used to better inform practice. These organizations are then able to identify and address trends, opportunities, and challenges in ensuring a more equitable criminal justice system. They believe that what gets measured gets managed and are committed to putting this philosophy into practice across the country. So today we are honored to be joined by Haley Schaeffer, who is an analyst at AH Datalytics. She's passionate about using data to ensure equitable action in the public service space. She believes that data can enhance understanding and help organizations make better decisions. Prior to her work here, she worked as a senior research analyst at the United Way of Central Indiana, where she helped to grow their data capabilities through the implementation and maintenance of an internal data warehouse. She also assisted with the creation of dashboards, interactive maps, and detailed reports that helped improve the understanding of the impact of United Way of Central Indiana's work in the community. So today, to talk to us about how to use data to evaluate public safety and criminal justice, we have Haley Schaeffer. Haley, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you all. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. So I'm really happy to be here with you all and excited to dive into the world of data analytics. Um, I have been with AHD about 2 years now, and it was started by our two co-founders who have been doing this work for many years. They're both nationally recognized leaders in the criminal justice space, um, both in data analysis and policy management. So I am honored to work for them and with them, and we have a really great team. And so and we get to work with really great clients every day. So it's been a wonderful 2 years so far. And then, yeah, we work with clients kind of across the country and all over the wider criminal justice space. And while I am going to be talking, I'll share a couple slides with you all. A lot of what I'm going to be doing is just kind of walking you through some of our past work and just sharing how we use this work, or how we use these like data points, how they can be integrated into a policing system or even prosecutorial management, things like that. So yeah, please feel free as I'm sharing dashboards and things to ask me questions if you have them. I'll share all the links with you at the end. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started. So, so like Jesselyn said, we're using data to evaluate public safety and criminal justice. Our focus at AHD is increasing transparency, quality analytics, actionable insights, creating dynamic dashboards, and enhancing the data capacity and organizational understanding. So we work with organizations of all sizes and types, police departments, prosecutors' offices, city councils, nonprofit organizations focused on criminal justice and education, colleges and universities, and the U.S. Department of Justice. My role as a senior analyst is to work with organizations to identify their need and deliver analytics in an approachable way. So we work as hard as we can to be flexible and dynamic and to utilize a variety of software and tools that meet each client's individual needs. Um, One of the big pieces that we do is work with data collection and integration. So we work with agencies and organizations of all sizes, which allows us to be adaptable in our approach to data and our offerings. We work with departments and agencies' records management systems. So we actually don't sell a like an RMS or any kind of software management system. We take the data they already have in place and we sit on top of that to use the data they are already collecting and make it available and actionable and understandable. Um, so below, I have this little kind of a screen grab of an Excel document. It's hard to read and I can show it to you on a bigger screen. But it's just an example of a records management export that we get from a really small police department. So some departments have exceptionally robust databases where we can go in and see every crime that's happened for the last 20 years. Some departments have a very small reporting system. They don't have a lot of information. And so they use things like this, CSVs, Excel documents, and exports along that line. So a large part of my position is working with the departments to understand their data. For example, my first client at AH Datalytics was a police department in a small town. They had a population of less than 8,000, and the only person in the department who was like able to navigate their records management system was a sergeant. So I worked directly with the sergeant to get data to build them a dashboard that's public facing, and I'll be showing that in just a little while. But it's really interesting. We get to work with every level of person at the different departments, and some of them have really robust data teams already, and some of them you're working with the officers themselves or the chief themselves to get the data that we need. So it's always different, and it's always fun.
Haley, can
So
I jump
some
in? with a
Yeah.
quick question on that. Um, so are the police departments, are they contacting y'all for your support, or are you reaching out to them saying this is support that we can provide? Is this something that you're interested in? Who's typically the initiator of that outreach? Is there one?
So I am not super in the I'm not in the client gathering space. I think for the most part, um, people reach out to either Ben or Jeff, the two co-founders. A lot of it is by word of mouth, by like you said, seeing things that we post and things we have available in the media. Um, but yeah, a lot of it is we do go to conferences and things as vendors, but for the most part, I think it's kind of a mix. I think sometimes we reach out to people and we say, hey, we have a really great product we could help you develop. And then other times it's a lot of word of mouth. So yeah, it's definitely a combo. Um, so some of the technology and tools that we use commonly for dashboard software, we commonly use Power BI, Tableau, and Data Studio. We lean really heavily towards Power BI. And that is because it's fairly inexpensive and most departments already have Microsoft Base. And I mean, most agencies in general, most government entities in general already have a Microsoft base that they are set upon. So integrating Power BI into an organization that already has a deep understanding of Microsoft is very simple. We also use Tableau, the Google Data Studio or Looker, things like that. Um, Tableau is pretty expensive, so it depends on the entity for which we're working with. Some I think they have like some free versions as well, but for the public facing, larger, more robust dashboards, Power BI is typically a good solution. We also help with a little bit of data collection systems. We just very basic kind of collection forms with Microsoft Forms or Form Assembly for some clients. And then we also have the analytic and database programming language capacity with SQL and R. I'm not an R person, but we have a couple people on our team who are really familiar with it. Um, and so I am gonna hop right in to the dashboards. And every dashboard is just a link in itself, so it should be able to take you right to it. And I've got a lot of them, so please stop me if you find one particularly interesting, you want to ask more questions about it or anything like that. Um, but I do have a lot of them. So this first one is for the Orleans Parish District Attorney. So when the new district attorney was elected, they did a lot of work on increasing the transparency around um, previous previous crimes that were brought forth and things like that. So and they also just wanted to um, share this information. So a lot of, as you can see, like the prosecutorial performance indicators, MacArthur Foundation helped to fund this work so that the Orleans Parish could get some of this information out. So we have leadership and line prosecutor diversity. So this is just a look at the diversity within the Orleans Parish DA. Clerical and paralegal capacity, again, just kind of an overview, and the number of staff dedicated to IT and analytics. So you can see that they started with just one data person in 2021 and slowly began adding data people. So now they have 7, which is really great. We have the time and resource prioritization look. So they prioritize cases with the greatest public safety returns. And so you can see the percent of cases accepted that had a felony charge over time, and the percent of screened cases that have been accepted. They also have the diversion and decision placements. So whether or not it was a successful diversion or not. And so there was 114 people successfully completed a diversion program in 2022, which is really great. We look at the timeliness of case processing. So that is one thing that has been a big topic is the amount of time people wait either just for their case to process through or in jail, if they are in jail. So we want to, I mean, just in general, I think the goal is to limit the amount of time between charge and conviction. And so you can see kind of the ups and downs of that acceptance to disposition for felonies. And then also the limit in continuances. So you can see kind of whether it was the defense or the state. You can also see if it was a court related, but you can switch between kind of all of these indicators and see which type of indicator is most common, which one happens the most over the last 30 days or so. And then we have some info on addressing serious crime, which is violent crime prevention. And so number of violent crime cases referred for prosecution, just a lot of different information about that. Race and ethnic differences of the charging and plea differences. So essentially they wanted to ensure that they are allowing pleas for people of all races in an equal fashion. And so you can see lots of different indicators over the last 6 or 7 years. And then again, incarceration differences and prosecutorial ethics and integrity. So addressing past harm. So a lot of this is looking at cases with civil rights diversion interventions. And this also has the estimated lifetime incarceration savings for taxpayers. But one of the things that the current Orleans Parish DA did was review all of the past cases from the previous prosecutor and ensure that they were ethically sound. And so they went through all the past, and you can kind of see all the ways that they eliminated or changed some of the charges in order to make people sit in jail or prison for less amount of time. So the review of all of those cases took a lot of time. And then this also looks at the case acceptance rate for felonies and misdemeanors of the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office. And so you can see in the last year, they've accepted 3,100 felony cases and 2,500 misdemeanor cases. So it's a really interesting kind of breakdown. You can see just how and why they were. You can't really see why, but yeah, and you can see it for adults and juveniles too. So lots of really neat indicators on here. For the city council for New Orleans, we had we are I think the correct term is public safety consultant is what we are considered. We're or were considered for the city of New Orleans. And so we worked to create, and by we, I mean my colleagues. I did not work on the New Orleans stuff, but I'm happy to share it with you all. So they worked to create many different dashboards that looked at all of the facets of public safety in the New Orleans area. And so you can see this is just their main crime dashboard. You can see the number of incidents over time, and then year-to-date incidents by type and in comparison. So it's especially post Mardi Gras, it's looking good so far this year. So it's been already a trending down year for them, which is really great in the city. And so we also have jail population. You can view the jail population at any one time to see what people are in jail for, and how many people are in the OPOS or SO custody. And this is for the last 10 years, which is really great. A lot of places don't have that kind of really robust data for such a long period of time. So it's really great that New Orleans does have that. And NOPD has a consent decree monitoring dashboard as well. It was created for the city council. So it kind of just it looks at some of the initial reasons that NOPD consent decree was put into place. So NOPD shall collect and maintain all data and records necessary to facilitate and ensure transparency and wide public access to information related to NOPD decision-making activities as permitted by law. So again, we are looking at the stop and search functions. You can see there's also the misconduct complaints over time, and use of force over time. So, and then again, it says race, gender by subject, and where the officer was assigned when the use of force took place. One of the other things they have is the bond paid dashboard. So basically this goes through, you can choose any charge of any type, and see how many bonds have been paid for that charge, what the average bond and the maximum bond was. So non-negligent net manslaughter, the average bond is around 12,000. And they look at the number that is under $1,000, or the percentage that's under 1,000. And again, that goes back to people were sitting in jail for an exceptionally long time because they couldn't afford their bond. And so they were waiting through everything for the case to be prosecuted. And then again, they had very high bonds, and so they weren't able to make those. So the current year felony bond is the 16,000, and misdemeanor is 29. So one other thing is the traffic cameras dashboard. So I believe that the traffic cameras, yeah, it ended in 2021. And so, but you can see the number of tickets that were issued by intersection, which I think is really interesting. So you can see this one's a really big ticket area. A lot of people running red lights. And so this kind of shows whether it was red light, a speed camera, whether it's school zone enforcement, and you can search the cameras by address. It's a really neat tool, but they did do away with traffic cameras, I believe, in the city. So this data kind of ends at that 11/9 of 21. For just community safety, we have quite a few different dashboards here. This one is one of my favorites. So this allows you to select or type in um, any address in the city, and you can see the 311 and or the calls for service that were reported in that area. So you can change the distance. So currently it's at 400 meters. We can knock that out to 500 meters. And you can see what types of crime or just general service, miscellaneous policing, medical calls that are happening in that area. So it's one of my favorite dashboards just because it's such a having this accessible to the public is really neat. But if you think about officers using it as well, it could be invaluable for an officer to be on their way to a call and be like, oh, I wonder what's happening around this area in the last, I mean, this is just the last 3 weeks. So it's really, I think it's a really invaluable tool to kind of just take a pulse of an area. So again, we've got the 311 events, 911 calls for service. And you can see all the different reasons a call for service comes in. Each little dot is a call. And then we've got the catch basins. That is a definitely a New Orleans thing. I think that's some kind of I forget what it's called. It's definitely a New Orleans thing. I think it's like a specific like drainage hurricane prevention thing. If I might be totally wrong too. And then it also looks at traffic related calls. And so this is just a heat map. So as you zoom in, it kind of shows you those hotspots for traffic related calls. So you can see like this little guy right here is pretty dark for the area. And then, or orange, pretty orange against that blue. And then we also have the racial disparities dashboard, which explains just the racial disparities and it breaks down the races and genders of the charges, the bond, and the sentence length over over the last year. And you can click on each of these to go to a separate dashboard that has a more clear breakdown. You can look at a specific race and gender, specific year, and or a specific offense. And you can also do the sentencing, see those disparities as well, and the charges and bond paid. So,
Haley, another question for you.
mhm.
So who within the New Orleans City Council are y'all engaging to get all of this information? Is it the City Council or is it each of the different agencies? Where is that?
So
What's the
yeah,
information flow?
so for the Orleans Parish DA's dashboards that I showed you previously, they had their own data collection system and RMS system that collected all of the DA's data. For the New Orleans City Council, we work directly with the I believe it's like the criminal just or public safety initiative portion. I forget the full correct title of it, but it's the subset of the city council that focuses on public safety. And so they will, the city council will make information requests on behalf of AH Datalytics for our analysis. In some respects, in others, we've worked with NOPD for the crime dashboard, the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office for the jail population information. So it's just really working with each entity within the city to get the information that is needed. Both of my bosses are New Orleans based. And at one point or another, they both have worked for NOPD. So they both have really great relationships within the city. And so this is probably the New Orleans City Council. I show this one because it's one of the more all-encompassing dashboards that we have, because it shows so many different subsets of the public safety sector in the city. It's not just looking at the policing data. It's not just looking at the jail population. It's it's got kind of a broad spectrum. It even later has staffing, the police staffing, hiring information, all kinds of stuff that is related to just general public safety in the city.
That's great. I think that also answers my second question, but just to confirm,
Yeah.
involvement or this degree of information sharing was not a stipulation of the consent decree, correct? This was of their own volition?
I believe so. So NOPD has their own public dashboards and things that they've created to comply with this consent decree.
Mhm.
This is separate, I believe, from that.
Okay,
This comes from the city council requests
got it.
that
Great.
were made of AH Datalytics as the public safety consultants for the council. And I don't think my boss Jeff Asher, he goes and my other coworker Rachel Weinstein, they go and do I don't think they've gone in a while, but they'll go and do presentations to the council, and things on specific requests. So a lot of a lot of I think it was late 2022, they did a couple presentations on response time. That was something that was getting really high within the city. And so they did a few presentations on the response time of policing and maybe why not only is the police, like the total police um, like staffing number directly impacts the amount of time it takes to respond to a crime and why some crimes may be going unreported because by the time the police are able to get there, it's gone on arrival. Um, so it's very interesting. Um, the city council always asks great questions, so I always love whenever they go, I always love watching, just for my own knowledge, but yeah. Um, so we've got a police performance, which basically talks about arrest rates, calls for service, um, details. And so this is kind of where you can see that gone on arrival or unfounded. Um, so here you can see in that kind of late hour of Sunday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, gone on arrival is much more likely to be the case. And then again, necessary action taken. It follows the flow of the calls received if you take over. And so it's and you can also see officer initiated. So whether it was an officer that initiated the call or if it was a citizen 911 call. Then there's also just a little heat map, which is that same general thing. Kind of the darker blue shows the hot spots and the denser areas where calls happen more frequently. Um, and then we do have a dashboard that focuses, for City Council has a dashboard that focuses directly on murder in the city of New Orleans. So this is through November of 2022. It looks like it may have stopped updating, but the year-to-date murder number for then was 239. So you can see instances of clearance, whether or not it's open, arrest, a warrant, or an exception was made. And they also have a motive kind of little pie chart, which I think is interesting, whether it was an argument, narcotics, and domestic, retaliation, robbery, retribution. But many, as we all can assume, are unknown. So, and then police staffing again, we can see recruits and officers over time. So yeah, I believe it was it was mid 2022 when NOPD dropped to under 1,000 officers for the first time in, I think, since Katrina. And so that was a really big deal, obviously. Now I think they're still down over 900 or under 900. So having that shrinking force is generating even more issues. So you can see here's the number of officers, and then here's the rate of officers per 100,000 people that live there. So it is still over the 1930s, 40s number. Jail population, we kind of already, I think, looked at that a little bit. But this is just more of a breakdown that's has like more descriptors, so a little more approachable for people who may not be familiar with dashboard navigation. You can kind of look at this and get a qualitative list and idea of what's happening in the jail. Here is the police response times. This is one of the things that I mentioned earlier. So we can see the share of incidents with an over 20-minute response time kind of taking a spike in 2022. And then spiking even more with the share of incidents with an over 60% response time. So, or an over 60-minute response time, sorry. So that you can see that just that trend. And we kind of talked about that with the police staffing. So as the police staffing went down, calls for service response times went up. And you can switch between the measurement options so that we have a median, an average, and a 90th percentile. Again, you can see you can check what kind of crime it was. So whenever the call came in, was it a person-related crime, a property, or just a medical issue, miscellaneous policing. So there's all different kinds of things. You can also see by call priority, whether or not it was an emergency, and still emergency slotted calls, 30% were not answered within 20 minutes. So it's a really interesting kind of study on just how much the hiring and retention of officers really impacts not only crime but the reporting of it. So, and then we kind of get into the police hiring, which is something that shows applications, people that were the applicants that were received versus the people hired, how many took the civil service exam. So it looks like they have not had any, this is for 2024. So it doesn't look like they've been able to hire any new recruits this year. And then average days from application to hire is 168, which is pretty long. And then you can also see the arrest. So you can see the arresting agency, whether it's NOPD, the Orleans County Sheriff's Office, or a state police, and what the most serious charge type is. So with the implementation of NIBRs, you can have multiple charges under the same case number. And so oftentimes we look at what the most serious charge type is over like what, because you have to quantify it in some way. So yeah. Any questions on any of those? Jeff?
Oh, sorry, Jocelyn.
Oh, no, go
Yeah.
for it.
Hi, Haley. My name's Ahmed. Thanks for talking to us
Hi.
today. I just have a question about your organization in general. So you said that
Yeah.
you guys use all the data that the organization already has, like going forward too. So
Yes.
you guys don't do any like backtracking, do you? Like, say if they had any missed data or anything like that, you don't do like the data retrieval or anything like that?
No, we do go backwards with the data retrieval. So a lot of times we go back as far as they have data available. For each department, that's different. Oftentimes, one of the very common things is that departments change RMS systems and they don't always connect to one another. So every time a records management system is changed over, sometimes you're limited by it. You only can pull the data that is from that records management system unless they had a robust data collection process previously. So, so for New Orleans, the data goes back a long time because it's a larger city. They have a lot better, they have a larger data team. They have a lot better database infrastructure. But some of the smaller departments, like I said, they're pretty reliant on their records management system to be not only their records management system, but also most a database of sorts for them. So whenever they switch between them, sometimes it can be limiting on how much they can move forward with and how much data they can connect to from their previous system.
Definitely. All right. Thanks for that. That was helpful.
Yeah. Um, and Jesselyn, did you have a question? Sorry.
Nope, it's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And so yeah, so that's kind of the New Orleans City Council dashboards. I'm going to show this one really quick. This was actually my very first client with AH Datalytics. And it's a very, very small department in Nebraska. And so I think they had 10 to 15 officers for about 8,000 people in this town. So it's a very small department, so it'll look very different from New Orleans. So for calls for service, their average response time is 6 minutes. And they take calls for the whole county, so they kind of are spread out. But this is actually the town that that has these calls, and these are for this year. You can look at last year, but again, their response time is always held pretty solid. So it's 6.4. So a lot of the time, so these smaller departments, they are able to respond quicker, and they also are able to spend more time at the individual calls. And again, you can see the different descriptions, whether it's an emergency call, whether it is a person, property, or society call, and what the reporting methods are. So, and you can see even by day of week how their times go up and down. So, a lot of this was used by the chief at the time to help him decide when more officers may be needed. So the calls for service by day of the week and hour, there's some hours and days that they haven't had any calls for service at all this year. Like I said, it's a very, very small town. But then again, like I said, he used some of this for predictive staffing. So that hey, Wednesday night is kind of an unexpected night to need extra officers, or even you would expect Friday, Saturday nights to be a heavier call night, but really they had quite a few on the Tuesday, Wednesday side. So And you can also see the number of calls by time of day. And this was a specific request by him. So this was traffic. And basically they wanted to look at like high injury areas. So for this year, there's just been one accident with an injury. And so they used that information as a city to determine whether or not they needed to add a stoplight or a stop sign or just have more enforcement in that area if there's more accidents. And then we also have the offense counts. So this is by month and year. So this looks at all of their offenses so far this year. So they've had 61 in total. And 22 of those have gotten a disposition of closed. And you can look at all the different types of crime. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe property crime was their highest typically. The highest number is typically, it was typically property, and it looks like a little bit of society, but and these are all of the diverse crime categories. They also had some city ordinances that they wanted to track, so where those were happening, and then again that looking at traffic crimes. And again, it's the same offenses, only the time of day kind of breakdown, only it's with offenses instead of calls for service. And again, this year it's been fairly, I think probably a fairly normal year for them so far. And then we have this year to date. So actually the crime is down quite a bit this year. So you can see there's a 51% decrease so far this year from last year. And you can see all the different ways and spaces that has decreased. So traffic crime is down quite a bit. Society, I mean, everything is really, but you can see those trends in this year to date page. And here's the offenses map. So you can see whether it's person, property, society, or traffic, and all those different spaces that those are happening. And then we also have victim demographics. So this was something we added on, I think, middle of last year for them. They got I think, capacity for the first time to really start recording this more robustly. And so once they got a decent sample, they asked us to get this added to their dashboard. So we're able to see the offense victims, race, sex and gender, ethnicity, and age. And again, we can look at it by the severity of the crime and by the type of crime. Again, demographic map. So we kind of see it's by race. It's a breakdown by race. So it's offense victim by race here. And then we also had a traffic citation request. So they wanted to look at the race, gender, and ethnicity of the people being issued traffic citations. So we can see those here. So it looks like they've done 3 this year. So again, very stark difference from New Orleans, which is why I kind of like to show it right after it. Because I think it's like I said, this is a really small city or really small town, and it's the way that this information is used is, while probably slightly different, it's very similar. This is public on their website. They believed they did this to get the transparency out there for the citizens of the town. They wanted that transparency to be publicly available. So that was one of the big pushes that the chief had, was he wanted this dashboard and he wanted it on the website, and he wanted it to be updated as regularly as possible. And so for this, we built them a really unique system. They didn't have a very robust records management system. They used something called Central Square, which is it's a records management system, but it's it doesn't they didn't have the database connections or anything like that. So we actually used their reporting function to send an email to a specific email every single day. And then we used a Microsoft Power Automate flow to save down the CSV and save it to OneDrive, which automatically updates this dashboard every morning. So it's kind of a unique way of doing it. Typically for larger organizations, we pull directly from the database, which is refreshed every day or so, or it's refreshed ongoing. And then we're able to refresh the dashboard that once or twice a day, depending on how often they would like it. Whereas this very unique solution for a smaller organization that just didn't have that capacity. And then they also had code enforcement. So they wanted to see where they were enforcing their codes. And then just kind of the descriptors. And so again, this is public facing. This is available on the police, on the Alliance Police website. So they wanted to have kind of these definitions available for the citizens if they had questions. They also have this little link that we added last year, which takes you directly to the OneDrive account that is that has all of the data available. So the transparency initiative was very strong, and they wanted everyone to be able to have access to this information. It doesn't contain any PII. It does have case numbers, but no names or date of births or anything like that, which is why it's able to be publicly made available. So yeah, any questions on that?
No questions. I just want to reiterate how impressed I am that this is all available. I mean, Ahmed, what you and I were talking about last week was the challenge in accessing a lot more basic information than this. And what we're seeing here is a great deal of information that, and to what you've just, Haley, what you've just talked to about how Nebraska is using this information, it's, it is growing an evidence base to ensure that staffing can be more accurately deployed. It is allowing for different tracking mechanisms to be put in place. So I think this is just a very interesting value added that perhaps wasn't touched upon in our first session, where we think we were hearing about some more of the fears around data tracking and information gathering. So I think this is a very interesting contribution to our conversation this semester. Just the novelty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and that's one of the things that like I love about AHD is that we really meet the departments or just the organizations in general where they are. If they don't have the data capacity, we work with them to get there. If they don't have the data staff, we work with whoever they have available, who is the most knowledgeable about what they do have. And sometimes it's us remoting into their computer and kind of just working through it on our own, figuring out how their RMS works. We have familiarity with so many different ones at this point that, getting in there and kind of just poking around, we can typically get a report running or something like that. But yeah, it's a unique solution, I think, for every department. And we always have kind of the things that we think are really important, those calls for service times a day, the offense times a day, that year-to-date overview, things like that. But again, like I said, these bottom four were all specific requests by the chief. So he reached out and said, hey, I want to add these 4 or 5 things to this dashboard. Like, is that possible for you all to do? And so we worked with them to get those extra reports that would have the like the victim demographics, citation demographics, and get those added for them. So yeah, we really I think that's one of my favorite things, is that no two departments' dashboards are exactly the same. We always try to listen to both what they want, but also like whenever we get in and look at their data, it's always different. Some departments have more than others. Some departments have something that is very easy to view, and then it takes a lot of time and processing on our end to get it to be readable. A lot of departments have a case number and then just a NIBRS code and a time of day, and so we have to work to do all those crosswalks and matching and make sure that we're matching the cases accurately to the crimes and calls for service, things like that. So that is one of the things that one of my bosses is very well known for is calls for service classification. Calls for service are so every city has their own codes, their own definitions for the calls. And so classifying, we work to kind of classify them into the different sections. So the medical, the service, the miscellaneous policing, whether or not it fits the description of a NIBRS person, property, or society crime. We kind of take that time to go through each and every call type that they have and work to classify them in those larger categories. So that way it's more easy to interpret. Because if you had to look at the call description, there's, this is a very small department, but there's 15 kinds of medical calls maybe. And they're not all very intuitive. So getting kind of just these larger, broader descriptions is super helpful for especially public facing dashboards. People that aren't familiar with criminal justice and are just trying to look and get a few pieces of information. Yeah, and then this is one thing. So I wanted to share this. This is the year-to-date murder. We call it our murder dashboard. This is collected literally source by source. So I did it for a while. We kind of I did it for a while. We usually do it twice a week, where we click on I think I made it think too hard, sorry. So currently this has 212 cities. That is the year-end data for 2023 and 2022. It is really not liking me right now. But it contains individual links for each department of the 212 cities. So some cities we get some of the data from the Major Chiefs Association quarterly report, but probably 120 cities I would estimate. We use their website. I'm gonna reload this. We use their website to
I'll just offer real quick, Haley, I am
Yeah.
also, I thought that murder dashboard was so interesting. I pulled it up on my computer and it won't load for me either right now. So
Oh, okay. Well, that makes me feel better.
my screen looks exactly as yours. It's doing
Okay,
a little blue bar thing. So just
here, well, I'll just
for
show
what
you
that's
here.
worth.
But so that does help me. Thank you. Because I was like, why isn't it working? I was gonna blame my internet, so it's fine. I was gonna blame AT&T. But no, so this is kind of just a snap. I took this screen grab earlier. So this is a snapshot of the year-end numbers. So we've got 2023, 2022, and then that nearly 12% drop in murder last year. So basically each week, twice a week, we click on each of the individual sources. which brings us to the department's page typically, sometimes the state's page. It just really depends. And we manually enter all of these numbers every single week to get an idea of the murder trends throughout the year. One of the biggest things is that the Uniform Crime Report is only put out once a year. So typically it's 6 months behind or so. And so that's one of the big things that this does is it gives an idea of the trends happening throughout the country. I actually have AHD in the news, and almost every one of these is my boss Jeff is primarily we call him the face. He does all the interviews and things like that, or most of them. But he did a lot. Almost all of these are around crime is dropping, but Americans feel less safe. Police departments are struggling to solve crime, just different things like that. So yeah, we use this a lot kind of as a pulse point to understand how crime is changing. And while murder isn't all encompassing, it is a really great indicator of violent crime. Because typically if murder is dropping, violent crime in general is dropping. So yeah, Jeff actually did a really great interview, I think last month. Oh, well, technically it's March now. So in January, I forgot it's March now, but in January he did a really great interview on C-SPAN for the Washington Journal, looking at kind of this downward trend in murder and why people are hypothesizing that may be happening. So, oh yeah, look at that. It was working earlier. When I pulled it up earlier, it was working. But yeah. So, any questions on that? Okay. So one of the other things that we do is we work with departments that have consent decrees. So my other boss, Ben Horowitz, is nationally recognized in the policy and consent decree space. He worked at NOPD and was really integral in making their data publicly available and getting their data quality and just accuracy up to meet the needs of the consent decree. So Puerto Rico has been under a consent decree since 2013, I believe. And we work with them to kind of to get that transparency out there, to get their data up to the quality that is needed to accurately track and report to the monitors. So we have different dashboards here. So crime statistics, use of force, administration, and then the situation of the reform. So I know these are in Spanish. There is English versions, I promise. I remember I was helping make these, and they were in Spanish whenever I was first helping make them, and I was like, I learned a lot of Spanish very quickly, but not well enough. But this is the current status of the reform. So it tracks each and every compliance area and shows the compliance rating. And so you can see professionalization, use of force, and they do have some that are substantially compliant, fully compliant, and then a lot of them have the rating deferred. Searches and seizures is kind of pretty high on non-compliance, but you can see each and every just overall topic that they have under the consent decree, and then they have a details. So this is each and every paragraph of the consent decree. Then it has a overall compliance area, a sub area, and then the latest monitor assessment. It also contains a paragraph description and the latest monitor assessment description. So it's very, very detailed. You can look at each and every status that is not compliant. see what the expectation is, and then where the monitor feels that PRPB currently sits in that area. So this is a really interesting, dashboard, I think, in my mind, just because it's exceptionally transparent. While that is always the goal, it is not exceptionally common yet. And so having this level of transparency is a really neat thing. You can also see we've got crime statistics and use of force statistics as well. So here's the use of force. And again, this is one of, if you saw on that consent decree dashboard, use of force is a compliance area for them. So they have this public facing dashboard now, that shows the use of force statistics from, and this kind of goes back to your question previously, Ahmed, has how far back can we go with the data? And so use of force, they just began tracking, I believe, in 2022, or maybe not just began tracking, but began tracking with enough accuracy and completeness to be able to be analyzed. So this starts in 2022, and you can see all of the different incidents by the different area commands. So Puerto Rico, since it's the police bureau is over the whole island, the area commands are almost like their counties / districts for the different policing, for the different police precincts. So you kind of think of the area commands as a precinct. And so, yeah, you can see all the different days of the week and when they happen, the level of force used, and the incidents by the level of force used over the last 3 years. Again, you can see the application types. And I believe one of the pieces was deaths in custody for their consent decree. And so having each of these application types quantified is very important for a transparency perspective. But yeah, so it's very, it's really neat. And like I said, all of this is available on PRPP's website, which makes it really unique, I think. Sorry, I'm clicking all around. I'm trying to go back to this one. But yeah, and so again, we have the basic crime statistics. Again, this looks a lot like what I showed you for both New Orleans and Alliance, but again, it's kind of a different take on it. So we do the average number of crimes as opposed to the total. Again, that's something that's a little bit more common in larger cities because it's it would be kind of too broad to look at the actual the total number, and you can always change the date, and so we can see if it changes the scope. Yeah, if it changes kind of the patterns year over year or each year, you can see if there's a different change, whether or not the precincts make a difference, which I always think is very interesting. So San Juan is the capital, so that's always a higher crime area typically than some of the outlying area commands. So again, crime by area command, crime modality. Yeah, year-to-date comparison. And then they even have a complete list of the crimes. The date it happened, the ID, the complaint number, area, precinct, what the category falls under, and then if there is a NIBRS code. So I just realized the description is still in Spanish, but so this is, yeah, simple assault, I think, believe vehicle, intimidation, robbery. So yeah. So that's one of the things that I think is really cool too, is that we do have people who are bilingual. So we are able to do things for departments in languages that I myself am not fluent in. So it's a very neat area that we're able to help, and it's really a great initiative by Puerto Rico and getting them more compliant towards their consent decree. Ferguson also kind of has they had a consent decree put in place after I believe after Michael Brown. And so they kind of had that investigation from the DOJ, and then a consent decree was placed. And so you can kind of see this is their take. We worked with them to create this on a consent decree dashboard, and then these are actually post consent decree policies, and to make sure they're finalized. And they also have training schedule information, which it doesn't look like they have anything so far this year. And then calls for service and crime dashboard as well. And again, a big part of, I believe, of Ferguson's consent decree was transparency and accurate data tracking and all of those really important pieces that make a big difference whenever you're talking about crime and understanding what's happening in your city. So, yeah.
Haley, that was great. Thank you so much. DC has recently launched our own crime dashboards, and so this is all familiar to me, but it's great to see the other types of data that is currently being collected, as well as how it's being analyzed and then used in practice.
Yeah.
Folks, do you have any questions, comments, concerns?
I don't know that it's a question, more of a comment that I think has sort of already been said, but I am kind of blown away at the transparency of the data in especially like New Orleans and then the little town in Nebraska. I just appreciate that. Like as we've talked about, having conversations about how hard it is to get that data sometimes. I know where I am, it feels really hard to,
Yes.
and there's not a lot that's public facing. If you get the data, you're doing the work of analyzing it. So just having something right there, public facing, I'm just like, it makes a difference.
Yeah, it's really great. And I mean, we even work with departments that don't share the full dashboard. I can share an example of that really quick. So we worked with Baldwin Park to create a dashboard for them. It's mostly internal facing, but I believe maybe it's not on here yet for this year. Oh, there we go. I just went too far down. So you can see all their crime statistics. So essentially they work to do, we worked with them to create a dashboard. And this is just a single page of their probably 20-page dashboard. But again, it's that transparency piece. It's not interactive. They were worried a little bit about like the PII and the and things like that. But of being able to like zoom in on a map and see exactly where a crime occurred. And I mean, that is a completely valid thing to be worried about. I think a lot of police chiefs are worried about that. I think a lot of just people in general are worried about that. My master's is actually in geographic information science, and I remember one of the case studies that we looked at in my master's program was looking at the Katrina victims, and there was a map posted that wasn't even like an interactive map, but if you zoomed in, if you could get within like 100 meters of where the Katrina victims were found. And so it's always kind of a case study in being cognizant of what you're sharing. So again, we work really hard to do more aggregate kind of things in this space if especially if they're cautious of the PII issue, and we try to be cautious of that issue at all times, because at the end of the day, we don't want to endanger anyone with a data point that might be out there. So yeah, so this is one of the ways that, you know, a department who, again, this is a smaller department. It's a department in California, much larger than Alliance, but still on the relatively probably medium size. But again, they every month post their year end or their month end statistics, and then they also have their year end statistics. So it's a different way to share the transparency and to share the dashboard, but I still think it's a really important step in getting that level of knowledge out there.
I fully agree. And so I would encourage the students here, as well as ones viewing the recording, to see how this degree of transparency stacks up to your local or statewide policing departments. I'd be curious to have that conversation at our next seminar check-in, because I would recognize, or I would anticipate there being a fairly large discrepancy between some of what we've seen here and what's in your areas based off of what y'all have told me previously.
Yeah, even in my area, I am in the Indianapolis area, and for the murder dashboard, so that's one of the things that we keep up. We had to rely solely on press sources for those totals. So it's not even something, I mean, literally I live in the city, and so it's not available here where I live. So the transparency that I work on helping departments get to each day is not something that my city does well yet, hopefully. But I think they are working towards it. I know that initiative and that push is definitely out there from members of like just city members and things like that. I know city council is pushing for it as well. But yeah, it's different everywhere. And it's just never, it's not always where you expect it to be. So
I'd be
Yeah.
curious going
Okay.
forward to hear more about what good practice looks like and what degree of transparency community members are looking for to provide additional guidance to police
Mhm.
departments. So I think that might be the next step for us. Sorry, Melody, I didn't mean to cut you
Yeah,
off.
no, you said community members. That's what the other thing that stuck with me, just not a question, but so much is just something to maybe ponder, is that idea that crime is down, but people aren't feeling safer. And yeah, what it makes me curious what part transparency plays into that, and having data available.
Mhm.
But it is an interesting phenomenon, I think.
It is. Yeah, I definitely encourage you to watch the C-SPAN interview that Jeff did. It talks a little bit about that. He specifically mentioned that in the 90s, when the Gallup polls were going on, which is a lot of the pulse point, that's the national polling kind of ideal that they look at. People felt that crime was going down in the 90s when it was going down. And now people continue to believe that crime is getting worse while the crime reporting and the actual statistics show that it's not. So it's very interesting. There was a big jump in especially violent crime around COVID. And Jeff talks a little bit about that in there as well, that you know, there was that big inflation, there was that double digit growth in murder specifically over the 2020 2022 or 2021, and then as things began opening back up and community services started becoming available and police officers were able to operate with more normalcy jails were able to operate at full capacity, those numbers really did go down, and they're continuing to go down. And so, I mean, a 12% drop this year is unheard of. I think it's the single largest drop since it's begun, since tracking has begun. So it's a huge decrease. I think it's even larger than, I think the last largest decrease was in the 90s, and it wasn't even a double digit, I don't believe. So it's really, really exciting because it does show, like, especially, like I said, murder. It's one of those that it's not an influencer, but it's my words, I'm sorry. It's kind of like an indicator of violent crime as a whole. And so seeing that go down is just very, very encouraging, I think, for all of us in the criminal justice space.
I wholly agree. Of course, as I've told this group before, Washington, D.C. is the outlier, which is also very
Yes.
interesting. But
Yes.
that's more of interest only to me. So
Yeah.
Folks, other questions? Great. Well, Haley, thank you so much for taking the time to provide us with this wealth of information this evening. It's been really valuable as well as interesting and thought-provoking. So appreciate you for taking the time and energy.
Yeah. Sounds good. And I'll get you the PowerPoint sent over. Feel free to share that. It has all the links. It also has my contact information. So if anyone does have questions, whether they're watching now or watching the recording, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer whatever questions. And if I don't know the answer, I can definitely ask someone in my space who does. So
yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your approach to transparency as well. So everyone here, thank you for joining. To those watching the recording, thank you for tuning in. Have a lovely, safe, and evidence-based weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.